Hello and welcome back to the World Championship in Through the Ages. Today we are going to take a look at the second one of the 4-player games of my group. The first one you've seen in the last video, in that I was able to win. Drodriguez finished second, amaj third, and Ching finished in the last position. And without further ado, we are starting with taking a look at the game and first of all at the leaders and wonders. And we can see that we have quite some lab synergies. I think all of the lab and science leaders are there. We have Einstein, Bill Gates, Sid Meier, Marie Curie, Steve Jobs. There is also the space flight, only maybe the Manhattan Project and potentially the internet are missing for some additional synergy, but going for some labs and some science production could have a big payoff here in Age 3. Fleming is the only theater or culture leader. There's no Hollywood, no internet, so not a lot of synergy for that in Age 3. And then we have Mandela, no Pierre, no Gandhi, no Churchill. There is the Red Cross. In Age 2 we have Ocean Liner Service and Maria Theresa as a strong combination. We have the railroad, we have also the Suez Canal but no James Cook. We have some culture leaders in Age 2 with Bach, Shakespeare and Darwin. There's Nobel but no Newton, and also 2 military action leaders with Robespierre and Napoleon. We also have 2 military action leaders in Age 1 with Jan Žižka and Joan of Arc. And then there is Columbus, Isabella, who can maybe work nicely if you plan to go for the Suez Canal. We have Gutenberg, but no Leonardo. There's Michelangelo together with St. Peter's Basilica. Machu Picchu as maybe a potentially strong leader. And then we have Saladin as a solid leader. Ching is in first position. He just goes for Hammurabi, which I think should be the correct choice. He's just a very strong leader. For Drodriguez, I think his choice is also relatively straightforward. He will just go for the Stonehenge and the Ridgeland. Amaj will then go for the Hanging Gardens and the Frugality, can take a wonder together with the yellow card, and is valuing that more highly than going for any of those leaders or wonders that are available for 3 civil actions. Then it is my turn, and I will take one of those cards for 3 civil actions plus the Patriotism A. And it was relatively clear for me that I want to go for Ashoka here. I think Ashoka in last position is quite strong. Ashoka also makes the Patriotism A pick a lot better, because I can just use it to get an additional color, which actually makes that card quite useful compared to when I would take the Patriotism A together with either Sun Tzu or the Acropolis. I don't really want to go for the Acropolis, because when we take a look at what wonders are left in the deck, it's the library and the pyramid, so there's the potential for me to gain some very strong wonders instead of the Acropolis. And Sun Tzu in last position, I mean, there's a Suez Canal, there is some synergy. Maybe some players would like to go for a bit of an aggressive game plan here, but in the last position, I just like Ashoka quite a bit. I can take him together with the yellow card, and with that I was quite happy about my first pick, even though the yellow card is of course not the ideal one, but we will actually see that it will turn out to be relatively useful. Ching goes for Hammurabi, builds a mine, increases his population. Interestingly, goes for the Acropolis. Could have also taken 2 yellow cards like Urban Growth, Frugality, and then maybe could have gone for Pyramids or Library. At the next turn, well, maybe the stronger wonders, Drodriguez and Amaj have already committed to a wonder, but he is willing to instead go for the Acropolis now, and that maybe leaves him with more actions to maybe react on the first H1 cards that might be coming down the row. Drodriguez goes for Confucius. Elects him, builds a mine, increases his population. I think a very straightforward turn. Amaj, interestingly, grabs the Engineering Genius for 2 civil actions and then goes for Caesar. I do think that's probably not the correct choice, taking that Engineering Genius. I think he should probably just build a mine and increase his population. The Hanging Gardens is not a wonder that you necessarily want to rush, and it's just too expensive. You are missing out on 1 resource production, so it's basically only giving you 1 resource, and that for 2 actions is just too expensive. Maybe Amaj is overvaluing the Engineering Genius a little bit, because also in one of the 3-player games we will see him take it for 2 in a position where I certainly wouldn't have taken it, so that's maybe potentially one of his weaknesses, or maybe he evaluates that card just a bit differently. Now it's my turn. I will go for the Pyramids, a generally strong wonder, maybe even especially good with Ashoka, because the additional action makes it more easily possible to activate the full Ashoka bonus. And then the rest of the turn, again, I think is somewhat straightforward, because I will elect Ashoka here and take the Knights. I'm playing against Confucius and Caesar, so the event deck might flip very quickly, and with that I do think the knights have quite a high priority. Even without that, maybe I would just take them here, but with that I think they are a must grab, so that I'm prepared to increase my strength in a nice manner. And then of course I could build a mine, but I can also just then with my last action get the additional resource production by electing a Shoka, leaving myself with a free population for events, which could be very relevant, because again I'm playing against Confucius and Caesar, so there might be a lot of developments revealed. And who knows, when there are some additional resources revealed, maybe I could even rush the pyramids. And if not, I can, with the 5 resources that I'm having thanks to Ashoka at the next turn, also build my third mine and my second lab. Plus I have one civil action left over that if there is the right card, if there's another color available for one civil action, I can then also make sure to get a full Ashoka bonus going. So I think that turn is at the end relatively straightforward here. I draw 2 cards, the Pestilence and the Plunder. Jing Jing is interestingly taking the Engineering Genius 1 for 3 civil actions, and then builds the second lab. It's somewhat expensive, but I guess he has to use his action somehow. Maybe could have thought about Alchemy plus Urban Growth. Maybe I would prefer that over just taking the Engineering Genius. Also maybe taking Urban Growth plus Frugality for 2 actions the turn before instead of grabbing that for 3 and now being able to take the library. Could have now in hindsight worked out better. But now that he has committed to the Acropolis, I think just taking the Engineering Genius is fine, even though maybe I would personally prefer to get the Alchemy here. Drodriguez opens the development of trade routes, so some additional stuff is revealed. He is now going for the Alchemy, develops it, upgrades 1, increases the science production, and leaves himself the door open to maybe build an Alchemy directly, saving a civil action. Will have a lot of science now with Stonehenge, Confucius, and the Alchemy. Amaj Seeds opens the development of settlement. He doesn't see the second time, maybe he hasn't a second event drawn, and this turn, thanks to the 1 additional resource from the development of trade routes, he can now build a mine and the second lab, so gets his economy up and running now, and then uses the Engineering Genius to build the first step of the Hanging Gardens. Now it is my turn, and this turn it's not as straightforward. I do think I have some different options here, and as you can see I will actually finish the pyramids. At the beginning of my turn the development of settlement was evaluated. I had 6 resources and the additional population from the development of settlement, so instead of finishing the pyramids with those 6 resources, I could have also built the third mine and the second lab. So instead of 1 civil action, I would gain 1 resource and 1 additional science. So that I think is, if you can take a card, would be able to take a card that gives you that amount for 1 civil action, I think that would be a very solid card to take. But the civil action is also not bad, maybe especially with the Ashoka. The problem is, if I would have built the third mine and second lab, I would have 2 civil actions left over. One of them I would very likely use to grab one of those grey cards, either the Bread and Circuses or the Drama. It would actually be a close decision, because for the Bread and Circuses there's no Pierre in the game, but Darwin. For the Dramas there's Bach and St. Peter's Basilica, so it's not the best Bread and Circuses game, but a solid Drama game. So it would be a close decision, but I would take one of those to get a full Ashoka bonus. And then I still have 1 civil action left over. And at the end I don't want to take the Frugality, I have to be somewhat careful with my civil actions. So I would increase my population, so while I would get the full Ashoka bonus, I would actually go into consumption, neglecting or negating the 1 additional food that I would produce with Ashoka. And at the end, I decided to rather finish the pyramids here, not necessarily because I valued the civil action more highly than the 1 resource and 1 science, but because that allows me to do something, and it is to take the Silk Road here. I think pyramids and Silk Road generally is just a very strong combination. With the Silk Road you want to have additional actions, the pyramids gives you that additional action. With the pyramids you are not producing any culture, so if you go for the Silk Road you just make sure that you start producing a little bit of culture so that you are not too much behind entering age 3. And so of course you know how much I like the Silk Road, so at the end I went for the Silk Road here. Passed on those grey cards, so maybe that could make it a bit more difficult to get a full Ashoka bonus going in one of the upcoming turns. And I also don't get the full Ashoka bonus this turn, but I don't go into consumption, so that basically also gives me an additional food, and at the end that turn just felt best to me. But yeah, at the next turn I then I have to see. I might only be able to either build my second lab or the third mine, so so building those things could get a little bit delayed here. I draw the heavy cavalry tactic and a colonization card. With the additional food from Ashoka, maybe I will be able to actually go for 3 knights. Jing this turn finishes the Acropolis with the engineering genius, takes Gutenberg, the frugality and the drama. Drodriguez seeds, opens the development of science, maybe something that he doesn't need as much. He this turn will increase his population, interestingly builds a warrior, but I mean with Caesar it is possible that the event deck would flip before his next turn, and also it helps him to get out of corruption. He then builds the Step of the Stonehenge, takes 2 yellow cards. Amaj this turn will seed, opens the development of religion. I think all of the players have a free population, so all can take the free temple. Amaj will take the second copy of knights, increases his population, and takes the alchemy. Now it is my turn. I don't necessarily want to push here. Can take the free religion, and as you can see I will actually take Columbus here. Which is of course a gamble. I don't have any colony in hand, but he's just such a good transitional leader. There is a Suez Canal in the game, and it's just so nice with Ashoka getting this additional color, being able to keep Ashoka as long as possible, and then getting such a strong transitional leader, that I'm willing to go for the gamble, even though it can of course potentially backfire. If there would be another strong card available for me that would allow me to get the full Ashoka bonus going, I maybe would not go for Columbus, but maybe even then. There's the Theocracy, which can be fine with the pyramids, but I decided against going for that. And so at the end I started my turn by going for Columbus, activating the full Ashoka bonus. I then increase my population, build a third mine. I could have also gone for the second lab here, but I thought I might actually need the resources more. First of all, building the mine also costs me 1 resource less, and it produces me an additional resources, meaning I have actually 2 additional resources available at the next turn compared to when I built the second lab. The event deck at the next turn might be flipped. I won't get stronger this turn, so I will already be at the risk of maybe be getting hit by a strength event, because I will remain the weakest for 1 more turn. But at the next turn I want to be prepared to get stronger. I want to be prepared to build 2 knights, and ideally I want to be prepared to build 2 knights and a Step of the Silk Road. And in order to achieve that, I will increase my population and I will take the reserves. With that I can build a Step of the Silk Road. After that I will be at 3 resources, and then I can play the reserves with the Silk Road bonus, develop the knights, build 2 knights going up to 5 strength, which will hopefully be enough to not be the weakest. The turn after, I could then play the Patriotism with the Silk Road bonus. Out of the sudden, the Patriotism could turn out to be quite a valuable card, together with the Silk Road, especially because the 2 additional draws that I will get thanks to the additional military actions could prove to be extremely worthwhile if they help me finding a colony for Columbus. And so the next turn I could play the reserves going for 2 knights, and in 2 turns I could then play the Patriotism with the Silk Road bonus, going for the third knight, having that heavy cavalry tactic, and hopefully then maybe even having the strength lead. So at the end this turn felt best to me, and because I need all of the resources to build up those knights, I decided to start by building the third mine here instead of the second lab. I could reveal the tactic already, but it would give a little bit of information to my opponents, and I also just wanted to get the draws here to maybe already find a colony for Columbus. I don't find a colony yet, instead 2 events. Both maybe could potentially be seedable, even though the immigration is not that great against Amaj's Hanging Gardens. Jing goes for Gutenberg this turn. Interestingly, is willing to grab the alchemy for quite expensive, so that's Gutenberg. I'm not sure, that's certainly not ideal, grabbing it for that expensive. So maybe he could have taken the alchemy earlier on. Drodriguez has already a copy. Maybe Jing could have kept Hammurabi, but maybe he has also a little bit of hand space issues going on, so he decides to go for Gutenberg already, takes the breakthrough. He will then actually develop the alchemy with his last action, and here I think he made a bit of a mistake. Maybe just spending his first actions and then thought, okay, what do I do with my last action? But of course, if he plans on developing the alchemy, he should use the Gutenberg activation to develop the alchemy and then just take the alchemy for 3 actions so that he gets the 1 science discount. So this turn he did a bit of a turn order mistake or did the wrong Gutenberg activation, and that cost him a science here. The Rodriguez seeds, so if amaj double seeds, I could potentially get punished by a strength event, which I was a bit afraid of. The development of warfare is revealed. Not ideal for me. I have a free population, but I kind of want to go for that heavy cavalry. I don't have any other tactic that I can work with, so at my turn I will actually skip that development, so I wasn't too happy to see it. The Rodriguez will take the free warrior, has now 3 warriors lying around. Builds the stone, some stages of the Stonehenge, and actually finishes it, so has now tons of science saved up. At the next turn with the science from Confucius could even develop democracy if we would already be in age 3. Now it's amaj's turn, and I was very happy to see that he actually doesn't see it at all, so I don't get punished for being the weakest here. He goes for 1 alchemy upgrade, a second one, and then develops the knights. Going for those 2 alchemy upgrades could turn out to be a little bit problematic, depending on how quickly the deck or the H1 or the deck will, or the card row will move. He now will only be able to finish the Hanging Gardens in 2 turns, which potentially could mean that maybe he has some difficulties finishing it, but there are still 23 cards left in the deck, so maybe it's likely that he gets 2 more turns going. It is my turn, and as you can see, I will actually seed a cultural influence into the deck. A relatively neutral deck could even be slightly good for me as soon as I finish the Silk Road. And the thing is, I will just get the strongest this turn. The Rodriguez maybe wants to push anyway. Ching Ching maybe doesn't get stronger, so I was hoping that I might have a chance of actually winning a strength event now when the Rodriguez seeds as Confucius, so I wanted the event deck to flip now. The event revealed is the development of planning, with the options being development of crafts, agriculture, and politics. I will end up taking the development of crafts here. I actually still thought about taking the free warrior, because I thought maybe I will actually manage to get the 1 free warrior and 3 knights. But probably I also want to build a second lab at some point. And with that, I decided to not take the free warrior here and just focus on building those 3 knights. I will develop the knights this turn, and I want to start using the Silk Road here. Thanks to the additional resources from the development of crafts, I actually can already this turn use the patriotism and still build the 2 knights, so that normally very bad patriotism is now giving me 2 resources and 2 military actions, so out of the sudden it turns out to be quite a nice card for me. I build a knight, I build another knight, I increase my population to get out of corruption, and I will take the theology, because with having the free temple, that gives me a very cheap way to fix my happy faces. And if I want to build a second lab, it could be that I kind of need to upgrade that religion to a theology in order to not have an uprising issue. So, and it also activates the full Ashoka bonus, so I think that theology is a nice pick here. I could also think about the warfare, but my science is relatively low. I at least will have a good amount of strength, so I should not need a military action to defend myself. Maybe I'm still in a position to be very aggressive, so it could be a nice card to have in hand, but I think here the theology should be the more important card. At the end I will actually reveal the heavy cavalry tactic. It costs me a draw now, but of course I will then already have it revealed, so I will get an additional draw maybe at the next turn when I build my 3rd knight. And I just wanted to keep that immigration in hand. Maybe will not be the greatest event, but it could be seedable. I have the theology in hand now, and so I thought maybe if it is my turn and I'm still the strongest, I might just be willing to push that into the deck in order to have a chance of hitting a strength event. At the next turn, one interesting option could be to actually finish the Silk Road with those 5 resources, and then with the last action play the reserves for 3 resources and build the 3rd knight, so that could be an interesting option, but depending on how the situation is, which cards are available, I might also do something different. I draw 1 card, not a lot, so I was of course kind of hoping for a colony, but so far I haven't had that many draws, so it's something that I have to expect, that I don't find any colony yet. Ching Ching goes for the Machu Picchu. reveals the fighting band tactic, and then builds 2 steps and a warrior. Is now at 5 strength. An interesting Machu Picchu take by him. He has neither iron nor irrigation, and is certainly a risk attached to that. He also doesn't have the most actions, so taking a card like iron for 2 or maybe even 3 actions would be somewhat expensive. Maybe if I found it challenging to use his actions efficiently this turn, but for example the Code of Laws I think would be a very interesting card for him, so I'm not really sure if I like that Machu Picchu take, but maybe he otherwise also would have had some issues to get out of corruption. drodriguez Seeds. Sadly, no strength event revealed. Instead, a Confucius event, so everyone gains 1 additional science. drodriguez with 18 science. The Code of Laws is, of course, the perfect thing for him here. He finally can go up to 5 actions, make use out of some of the science that he's having. He then actually builds the second lab, not as an alchemy now. Maybe he wouldn't need to do it to get out of corruption. Maybe he could also keep the population here and take the cultural heritage, but then again he doesn't need the additional science that much, and so maybe doing it like that is fine. And maybe could have also gone for Isabella here. Now he maybe can't know for certain whether he gets a leader still for 1 civil action while having still the ability to replace Confucius. So there would have been some actions where he maybe could have at some point built the second alchemy directly, but he decides here to just go for the additional science production right now. Amaj Seeds. The raiders are revealed. I'm not part of that, so that's nice. He seeds again, and the cultural influence is revealed, which doesn't change too much. Amaj this turn will use the frugality, builds a knight, and this turn it starts to get critical, because again he is investing resources, meaning if he doesn't get help from the events, he now will not be able to finish the Hanging Gardens very likely, because now in 2 turns the age should end very likely. So I'm not sure if he made a mistake here or if it was deliberate and he just felt like he doesn't want to be the weakest. Yes, he did some of those events. Maybe there are some bad strength events coming, and maybe he was just willing to give up on the Hanging Gardens here. He could have maybe built a warrior, though, maybe planning on copying the fighting band tactic, but we will see as the phalanx tactic, so of course the knight is a lot better for him than the warrior. And he's actually willing to take the iron for 3, which I was happy to see, because I wouldn't have taken the iron, and with that the first copy is already taken away from Ching Ching, but I might had to pay quite a big price for it. Could have also gone for Code of Laws, Cultural Heritage plus Irrigation, taking a bunch of those cards. So I'm not sure if the iron is really worth it here, and we will actually see that he doesn't even end up using the iron. So those, in hindsight, will be 3 civil actions that at the end don't do anything, apart from maybe, of course, delaying how Ching Ching, how quickly he will be able to get the iron. But yeah, maybe going for 3 cards for 1 civil actions, also maybe making sure to get a leader as a replacement for Caesar, maybe could have been better here. Now it is my turn. I'm not the strongest, and so I decided to not push the immigration because I will actually get strongest this turn. I will build a knight here. That means that I now would have the option to just play the reserves for resources and finish the Silk Road, which I think could be a very fine, relatively clean turn. But it has some downsides. First of all, I don't get the full Ashoka bonus. I think it's likely that I get another turn in H1, so I can keep Ashoka around again for 1 more turn. But if I play the reserves, I only gain 1 resource and miss out on the additional food from Ashoka. And also I can't take any card from the row. And maybe it's not too bad, but there are some cards that I think have the potential to be nice for me, and also are a bit of a denial from Ching Ching. One of them is of course the irrigation for his Machu Picchu, but the other one is the Code of Laws, because at his next turn he could actually develop the Code of Laws and the monarchy, maybe finish the Machu Picchu. Then of course he would miss out on the irrigation, so if I don't touch the row at all, maybe he doesn't go for the monarchy and just for the Code of Laws and the irrigation, but maybe then he has still a chance to get the monarchy at his next turn. And so I do think the Code of Laws and the irrigation both are very interesting cards here for him. And the second copy will then still stay on 3 civil actions if I should take those cards, so there's a chance that he might miss out on irrigation completely. And of course in a 4-player game you should not be too much concerned about those things, but you still should pay a little bit of attention to them. And the thing is, while finishing the Silk Road is not bad, It just gives me one science, and of course the two culture. The two culture at this point don't matter as much though, and instead of finishing the Silk Road, I can actually also just build a second lab this turn, which is of course a bit of a commitment from my worker. So maybe for the small chance that the age will actually end, it could mean that I am forced to go for the theology earlier, and maybe the Silk Road gets delayed even longer, but I thought it is maybe likely that I get another turn in H1, and then building the lab also just gives me that additional science. And so at the end I decided to play the reserves for resources, but not to finish the Silk Road, instead to rather build a second lab, and then I take the irrigation and the Code of Laws. The Code of Laws I can even develop it the next turn. Normally I don't like it too much to invest that much science into the Code of Laws, especially when I don't have the most science and when I have already the pyramids. I think the Code of Laws is somewhat of a luxury tech. On the other hand, I have the Silk Road. And with that, even more actions are just quite nice and could allow me to use even more yellow cards. So being early on 6 actions might be nice. And it's also a game where Robespierre is available, in which case I'm more willing to go very low in science, because it could end up being a possibility to still get into a government form with being on low science, thanks to Robespierre being there. And so at the end I was willing to take the Code of Laws here. And with that, both irrigation and Code of Laws are gone for Ching Ching, and the monarchy stays in 2 civil actions for him. So I do think, for me, both of those turns are fine, but for Ching Ching, the turn that I went for now leaves him with quite a bit worse options. I draw the Legion tactic, no colony yet, so I might get punished here for my speculative Columbus grab. Ching Ching goes for the monarchy with the Acropolis. I do think that makes sense. And then he will finish the Machu Picchu. That doesn't leave him the option to upgrade his lab this turn, but he can still use Gutenberg in order to, with taking the printing press. Drodriguez doesn't see it with Confucius, sadly. I, of course, was hoping to maybe win some strength events, but he has that open borders agreement. This may be a bit in danger from my strength push, so getting the additional military action might help him here. He also goes for the monarchy, invests the many science that he's having, takes the swordsman, the John of Arc, and then develops the swordsman, plays the patriotism in order to build up some strength. Is now even at 11 strength, so soon he might actually take the strength lead here. Now it's Amaj's turn. He takes the irrigation. So that one would have been gone anyway for Ching Ching. Either he takes it or it will be discarded in my turn, but Amaj wants to use it for himself, and we can see that here he doesn't have the resources. Maybe he was hoping for an event to be revealed. Maybe even hoping to win a strength event or something that gives him the resources to finish the Hanging Gardens. Him doing the play could also be an indicator towards such events. But yeah, either he just already the turn before gave up on the Hanging Gardens, or maybe now he doesn't have the possibility any longer to get the additional resources, and he will actually lose the Hanging Gardens, which is certainly not ideal, because now it would be the time where the happy faces start to be very useful. He had already built the first stage, so losing that wonder is certainly quite a setback for him. Going for the irrigation helps him to get out of corruption. Interestingly, it does that before going for the iron, but now that he doesn't get the happy faces, at the next turn he would have an uprising issue, so he needs the additional food to be able to increase his population and fix that uprising issue. It is my turn. I am the strongest at my turn, and after my turn I won't be the strongest any longer, because what happens here is that the age does actually end. All of the players have taken a bunch of cards. There was a risk that could happen, which is a bit annoying now. I have now an uprising issue. I could fix it with going for the theology, but as at my turn I will actually decide to disband the warrior. But even if I would keep the warrior, after my turn the Rodriguez would win the tie break. So now is one moment where I'm still the strongest, and because of that I was willing to push that immigration to hope that maybe I could get lucky and hit a strength event before I'm not the strongest any longer. I see it. And I was, of course, extremely happy to see that uncertain borders revealed, giving me a yellow token, removing a yellow token from Ching Ching. And as you can see, I will actually finish the Silk Road here. I thought about going for the theology, but I think it also leaves me with some issues to get out of corruption, and I don't need that warrior as much. It cost me a draw deleting this, which again with having Columbus is not really that great. So I was a bit worried at that point that maybe I took Columbus in a position where I just don't have enough draws to justify taking him, but I still have some turns left where I could maybe find a colony. But I finished the Silk Road. I think you can just use the additional science very much. I have the actions out of the way. There are a bunch of strong H2 wonders, so now I'm in a position to maybe take one of those if some of those should be available. I also, first of all, will fix my uprising issue by disbanding the warrior. I developed a code of laws, and then it was the question well, if I should take the breakthrough or the iron. For myself, I think the breakthrough is clearly better. Of course, I also still need some resource upgrades at some point, but if I don't take the breakthrough here, I'm 0+3 science, the iron will be very late. I think waiting for coal is just better in that case. There's a railroad that pairs maybe a bit better with the coal. And I do think the 3 science that the breakthrough offers me together with the Silk Road is just way too strong for me, but there's of course Ching, who still wants to take the iron for the Machu Picchu, and taking this copy of iron for 3 could maybe end up being a bit expensive for him, especially now that he lost the yellow token to the uncertain borders, he actually has a bit of uprising issues. So I could maybe remove the iron here, and maybe there's a chance that the Rodriguez would then take the last copy of iron away from Ching. But at the last turn where I was willing to do some denials, I think both of the turns that I had available were somewhat equally strong for me. Now I just think the breakthrough is way too valuable for me, so now I'm not willing to compromise my position in any way. I wasn't at the turn before. As said, then I think my turn was somewhat equally possible, and then that's the situation where you can consider how your turns affect your opponents, but now I think the breakthrough is just way too strong for me, and with that I took that as my last card, leaving the iron available to Ching, who at least will have some issues now anyway with the uprising, so maybe he is in a bit of a tough spot anyway, even though it is still a fine position for him with the alchemy and now getting the iron with the Machu Picchu. Ching sees the foray is revealed. Maybe that was seeded by Amaj, maybe that was the card that he was hoping towards, that could allow him to still finish the Hanging Gardens. If so, that gamble at the end didn't pay off. Ching uses the frugality, but because of losing the yellow token, he still has an uprising issue. He takes the iron, upgrades one, is now at 6 resource production, but with the last action, first of all, he will use Gutenberg for a free upgrade with the urban growth to alchemy, and then he will actually destroy a mine, so despite having the Machu Picchu for now, he will just, when he upgrades this, be at 6 resource production, so that's not too threatening, I think. The Rodriguez seeds, and the Confucius event is revealed, giving a science to everybody. He just goes for the iron, and thanks to the 3 additional resources that he takes from the foray, he can actually go for 2 upgrades here, takes the rich land, and ends his turn. There's actually a very interesting combination coming down the row here, and that is Robespierre and Republic, which I think would be extremely interesting for me. Amaj has only 4 actions, he can't make this combination work, but what he could do is to take the Republic for 3 and develop it with the 11 science that he's having, and I was extremely interested to see whether he will go for that or whether he will leave that combination available for me, which I would prefer. He seeds, the historic territory is revealed. I was actually willing to bid for that, 1 knight and a card. I could rebuild the knight. I mean, maybe not if I actually go for Robespierre Revolution, so that could be a bit problematic, but there's a Suez Canal in the game. I might still get a colony with Columbus if I maybe get some colonies draws. And then there's just still the possibility that having that colony could be nice, and I also know that the immigration is coming, so the Happy Face could also help me for that. But Amaj is able to win it, at least I made him pay a bit more. He has now to send those 2 H1 colonization cards away. And we can see he is not willing to go for the Republic. Maybe he feels a bit threatened now that he sent those colonization cards away, or he just wants to go for that leader, is maybe afraid of being stuck on 2 military actions, so he actually goes for Shishka here. Elects him, increases his population, builds a knight, is now at 8 strength. If he just would have built a warrior, would be at 7, with just having sent 2 H1 colonization cards away, so he might very well be in danger of an aggression, maybe even a double aggression, so it's understandable that he wants to play it safe here, but I was of course extremely happy to see that Robespierre Republic combination coming down the road for me. I don't see the Cold War here, it will take a while until it is revealed, and so far I don't know how my strength position will be then. And then, first of all, from the foray I will take a resource and 2 food, allowing me to increase my population. And I will go for Robespierre here. It's just too strong. The thing is, of course, I still have Columbus in hand. I could now elect him to get rid of him so that he isn't blockading or that he isn't blocking any hand space, but I will have 9 actions when I go now into Republic, so hand space is not really an issue for me, and that could actually be one of the very, very rare situations, and I'm not sure if I even had this once so far, where I could go for a leader of a later age first. I can do the Republic Revolution with Robespierre, and if I then afterwards draw a very strong H2 colony, I could still then elect Columbus and get that colony. Ideally, it would of course be the autonomous territory, because after the revolution, Robespierre is mainly helpful for his military action, but if I should draw autonomous, I could actually get the military action back with Columbus, and of course the other benefits that the autonomous territory gives here, so there is the potential here for some really interesting play. And so I certainly wanted to keep Columbus in hand, just in case I will draw a good colony early enough. So I go for Robespierre here. I do the Republic Revolution. That's extremely strong for me. I'm now at 9 actions, so that's a big advantage now for me over my opponents. And we also see now how valuable that breakthrough is for me, because thanks to the additional science from the breakthrough, I am actually able to go into Cola the next turn if it should be available. So, and generally, I think having 3 additional science just makes such a big difference here. So I think that Robespierre Revolution is something that I just have to do here, even though it could end up meaning that I don't use Columbus at all. And then I have 4 actions left. I can increase my population to get out of corruption. I could play it greedily now, take the efficient upgrade with the Silk Road. That likely will give me 4 additional resources. It could be extremely helpful because I still need to upgrade all of those things here. But I felt like with the Robespierre Revolution and the many actions, plus the Silk Road, plus not really falling behind culture, I felt my position is quite solid here, and I rather wanted to play it a bit safer and take the cannons, just making sure that I have that military tech already in hand, even though I really would have liked to take the efficient upgrade. I have now 1 civil action left. I don't really want to develop any colony because I want to be prepared to go into coal in case a copy should be available for me, meaning I kinda have to take a card for 1 civil action, offload the civil action. At the end I decided that maybe it could still happen that the masonry could be fine. There are some wonders where I can use the masonry nicely on with the railroad, ocean line, or potentially the Suez Canal. And I also haven't upgraded any urban buildings, so I felt like the masonry. There are some scenarios where it could turn out to be useful. There's also an opera that I could have taken, but I have now already an H2 leader, so I won't find a synergizing H2 leader. In H3 there's only Flaming, no Hollywood, so I don't think it's the best opera game now that I have committed to Robespierre, and instead I valued the masonry more here. Jing Jing takes the efficient upgrade, takes Napoleon, uses Gutenberg to develop the printing press, but afterwards will already go for Napoleon, is maybe a bit threatened by the military potentially, takes the selective breeding, which he will need now that he hasn't got a copy of irrigation for the Machu Picchu, upgrades his mine so that he is now at 6 resource production. Drodriguez interestingly goes for Bach here, and the opera has that combination, can maybe just complete his economy upgrades, and afterwards has now a clear way how he can transition into culture production. Can of course sometimes be a bit dangerous in a 4-player game, so you have to be very careful, but it can also still be quite strong, and so I think it's a fair choice to go for that here. He then upgrades his last mine and the last lab, takes the urban growth, has now 6 resource production for science production, and has Bach in hand to maybe start some culture production at some point. The first copy of coal is revealed. Sadly, Amaj hasn't committed to that iron yet, and also sadly the immigration is revealed. If it wouldn't have been revealed, maybe I would have built up some happy faces at my next turn if I don't have anything better to do. But now the immigration is out, and 2 of my opponents sadly are gifted a free population, so that event didn't work out as well for me, but seeding it gave me the additional yellow from the uncertain borders, so at the end it might still be fine. Amaj will go for the coal, thanks to the rich land. He has just enough resource to go for an upgrade, so I think that makes sense, and now I have to wait for the second copy of coal. He also takes a copy of organized religion. It's my turn. I was still not willing to cede the Cold War here, and there's sadly not the second copy of coal, and it would have been quite lucky if that would have been revealed immediately afterwards. And there's also no wonder. If there would be something like ocean liner or railroad available, I might be willing to just spend a bunch of actions to take it. Now I have 9 actions available, and maybe it is somewhat tricky on how to do, and because I have that many actions, I think I have to spend some of them to do something on my civilization. I can't just wait on all of the H2 things that I want to invest into, and because of that, I decided to start with some irrigation upgrades, which also will help me to get out of corruption and just allows me to spend some of my actions to do something on my civilization. I go for one upgrade, a second upgrade, and then I have some actions left, which I will use to just take a bunch of yellow cards. All of them could turn out to be very valuable with the Silk Road, and with the last 3 actions I take the breakthrough here. Don't think any of those technologies is worth more, and I also think even though I am on low resources, I have now already some additional resources with the reserves, and I also think the science from the breakthrough might be worth more, especially because it's more easily possible to get resources from. There are just not that many science yellow cards, which if there would be the same amount of science yellow cards as resource yellow cards, maybe I would go for the urban growth, maybe not even then, but with there not being that many opportunities to take such a card, the breakthrough I think is just too valuable. Now, at the end of my turn, I will get 3 draws, so I was very excited to see, will I get a colony, will I go for that very nice move of then at the next turn replacing Robespierre with Columbus, and then in 2 turns going for a colony with Columbus. Depending on how quickly the game will move forward, and with me having that many actions, it might of course move forward a bit more quickly. It might even be my only chance to draw a colony, because I of course need to find a colony. I then need to, at the turn after, elect Columbus, and then only in 2 turns after I can use Columbus, and there of course shouldn't be any risk of the age ending, so I might need to even to find a colony now in order to still pull that off. So I was very excited to see what I will draw here. Do I get the autonomous territory dream? I don't get it here, so I mean, it would have been quite lucky, of course, and I still was happy about the draw because I get that international trade agreement, which I think will be quite helpful for me. Ching Ching goes for the justice system, upgrades his monarchy. I think that makes a lot of sense for him. He then increases his population, takes the architecture and develops the architecture. That of course could be a big hint towards the potential Dark Ages. And yeah, maybe also just wants to spend his actions efficiently with the architecture and the justice system developed. There's maybe the chance that he could just take and finish an H2 wonder if he would like to, so that's maybe also a preparation for such a line at the next turn. Drodriguez seeds and opens the scientific breakthrough, so instead of losing science with the Dark Ages, the players are gaining some science now. I gain the least, but it's very close, so it's, I think, still a fine event for me. Drodriguez goes for the strategy, develops it, elects Bach, goes for the opera, and even builds one, so starts some culture reduction. He is passing into selective breeding, but the thing is, amaj and I have already irrigation. Ching Ching has already the first copy of the selective breeding, so he can just take it more cheaply at the next turn, and with that he is just using his actions to already now start some culture reduction, and with the strategy he remains the strongest and with a very good amount of military actions. And he also takes the navigation. Interesting that he takes that over the urban growth, which he can use at some point to get another opera going, or maybe upgraded religion to opera, so with him being willing to take that over a good yellow card, that could be an indicator that he has actually seeded a strong colony into the deck. Amaj seeds, opens the Reign of Terror. Ching Ching will lose a population. Amaj builds a warrior, goes up to 12 strength, takes Nobel, takes the Rifleman, elects Nobel, has lots of science production now, and then afterwards reveals the medieval army tactic to stay at 12 strength, takes the urban growth, has a full hand now, so that could potentially be problematic when he wants to go for an H2 government form, but he has enough science that he can, for example, develop the Rifleman or the organized religion and then afterwards still go for that government form. It is my turn. Sadly, the second copy of coal hasn't shown yet. I offered the international trade agreement to amaj. I certainly didn't want to offer it to Drodriguez. I don't want to help Bach surviving. And he has maybe the most solid position here. And then I just felt that amaj maybe has the worst position here. Of course he will, now with all of those government forms coming down the road, the next turn go for the government form, and then he has a fine amount of action. He still has that coal. So it's not that he has a bad position and that he's clearly the worst, but Ching, just with having the actions already, architecture, I mean, he will lose a population now, but I just felt I would slightly prefer maybe his position if I would have to choose here, but it's close. But I will, for example, now end up not taking the railroad, which was one of the options at my turn. That could mean that Ching will just take and finish the railroad, and then I think I would just prefer Ching's position over Amai, since I gave Amai the additional food as I evaluated his position as the weakest. At my turn, I thought I will go for the scientific method here. There's no coal, but there is the scientific method. What I could do is to go for the scientific method, also develop the masonry, go for one upgrade, and with the 4 remaining actions, I could then go for the railroad. Problem being, I would then miss out on the rich land, which is an extremely valuable card for me. And also, it's the question, when will I finish the railroad? The coal might be late. The railroad is quite strong, I like it a lot, but here it just felt too expensive to go for it, and instead I rather did something else. I go for the scientific method, using the breakthrough with the Silk Road bonus for 4 science. I could now go for the masonry, but instead I decided to go for the architecture, which cost me an additional action and 3 additional science, so it is a price that I have to pay, but I haven't upgraded any buildings yet. I have the theology in hand, but at the end of my turn I will actually go for the organized religion as a more efficient happy phase solution, and then with going for those labs and the organized religion and maybe even more buildings in H3, I thought the additional resource that I will save with not going for any H1 buildings will be worth it for me. And also, in case I should still go for a wonder like ocean liner service, then the architecture also works better with the engineering genius that I'm having in hand. So I was willing here to pay the additional price for the architecture, and it also allows me to go for 2 upgrades this turn instead of only 1, which pays me basically 2 science back immediately, and with that I just felt the architecture is worth it over the masonry here. That leaves me with 2 actions. As said, I really want to have the rich land. Thanks to the international trade agreement and the Silk Road bonus, I at the next turn have now just enough resources with the rich land and the reserves to go for 2 coal upgrades. So I was very happy to see that, and with that I was extremely happy about having that pact available. And so while I maybe get the coal a bit late, I might be able to get into it very quickly, and then I think it will still turn out to be quite strong for me. And then I still have 1 action left. And I also still have a hand space thanks to my 9 actions that I'm having. And as said, I decided to go for the organized religion here. It's just more efficient, especially with the architecture. And at the next turn, maybe I want to get into coal, maybe even also do some other stuff. And then I might not have the time to develop the theology. So the organized religion also gives me the freedom to go for my happy phase solution a bit later. And I'm not forced to maybe already develop it at the next turn if I don't have the actions for it. I miss out on the rifleman, so that's a bit of a downside. This time I was willing to take the risk, but I have at least the cannons already in hand. I have no tactic for rifleman yet. There's been no other tactic revealed, but it very likely will mean that I will miss out on the rifleman. So I was a bit worried about my military situation, and if I don't find the right tactic, that could cause some issues for me, especially with my low military action count. Which is another reason maybe to go for the railroad also, but I just didn't like it too much on how that was looking. Ching goes for the rifleman. He could potentially have taken the railroad and just finished it. I do think that would have been quite strong, and maybe for me the preferable way of getting some strength instead of going for a bunch of rifleman upgrades. He could still take the rifleman at the end of his turn. Could have also gone for some selective breeding upgrades, but he is still going for the railroad, and maybe he wanted to have the rifleman and the breakthrough, which I think is a fair choice. Drodriguez seeds opens the border conflict with Ching getting stronger. I am sadly the weakest now, so I have to destroy something. Also, the second copy of code is still not showing, so I was a bit worried. Drodriguez will get the ocean liner service. That will improve his position quite a bit. I was a bit afraid that he will have the ability to run away with the culture. I have no tactic yet. I might not be in a position to punish him militarily, and I still have those 9 actions. I was not worried too much, but I thought there is certainly the potential that Drodriguez will run away and that it could be difficult to catch up to him. He builds a step of the ocean liner and upgrades that religion to opera, going up to 11 culture reduction. Still has enough resources to finish the ocean liner service at the next turn. Now it's Amaj's turn. He develops the organized religion, then goes for the constitutional monarchy, upgrades a coal mine, takes the Kremlin and upgrades a temple to organized religion. The Kremlin, I'm not sure if it is the correct choice here. He has some excess happy faces for now, but as soon as he loses the 2 yellow tokens, he might actually need a happy face relatively soon. And he also doesn't have enough resources to finish it at the next turn, unless he gets help from the event deck, meaning it might be finished only in age 3. It could cause some happy face issues. He doesn't have the most population, so the happy face issues could be severe for him. So I think here, I'm not sure, I probably would not go for the Gremlin. But the Gremlin, of course, also could still offer some nice benefits for him. It's my turn, and I was hoping, come on, Cole, don't be in the last few cards of the deck. So I was worried, and the Cole sadly isn't showing yet, so I again have to find some alternative ways of increasing my civilization here. As you can see, I actually seeded a prosperity into the deck, with me only being on irrigations and with me now knowing that I won't have the ocean liner service available. I felt the additional food will be quite useful for me, and despite being the weakest, I was willing to seed, especially because I will remain the weakest even longer. A Confucius event is revealed, so some additional signs for everyone. I will this turn spend some of my actions already to go for the organized religion. I will build one. I will play the reserves with the Silk Road bonus to play 1 resource yellow with the Silk Road bonus this turn. I then also decided to rebuild my mine. Of course, I could maybe plan on building it at a coal mine directly, but I have enough actions so that I think just getting the 1 resource production a turn earlier might be better. Also, I didn't find a good way to spend my civil action in a different way. I then take 2 of those yellow cards, and I take the 2 that give me resources, especially the patriotism. I think with me being on low military actions is quite a valuable card. Especially because in age 3 there's of course the potential to go for another Robespierre revolution, but that would cost all of my military actions. But with the patriotism I have the possibility to do the revolution, play the patriotism afterwards, and still build some military units in case I would need it. And I also take the reserves here to, again, with the reserves and the rich land, have the possibility to go for 2 coal upgrades at the next turn if I would like to. For my last civil action, I wanted to increase my population, and it was a bit of a question for me if I should do it with the frugality or without. If I don't use the frugality, I don't get the Silk Road bonus. Maybe I have the chance to do it again at the Silk Road bonus, but that was not the main reason to keep the frugality in hand if I would do it. Instead, I don't have knowledge about rats, and I could just lose all of the food from the frugality if the rats should be in there, and especially drodriguez could have seeded the rats potentially with him now having the ocean liner. Of course, he just took the ocean liner service at the last turn, but he didn't have any farm upgrades, and didn't go for farm upgrades yet. I mean, he just took the selective breeding again also at his last turn, but it's certainly possible that the rats are in there. But if I don't get the 3 food from the frugality, it could just delay the next population if there are no rats, or if the rats are not revealed quickly. And at the end I just decided to use the frugality regardless, so that at the next turn, if I don't get hit by the rats, I can get 1 more population out. And even if the rats are on the deck, there's still a chance that they could be not revealed before my turn if they are maybe the 2nd or 3rd card, depending on how much seeding is going on. So I was willing to use the frugality here. I could have taken the cavalryman, because I only get 3 more draws now from age 2, meaning I might have to be prepared for age 3 tactics, but there is actually another copy of cavalryman in the deck, and with that I at the end was willing to not take them here. I was hoping for a tactic, and actually do get a tactic, but not really a good one. I think that transition might be too difficult for me, and I also have to wait for modern infantries to use it. I draw another colonization card though, which could be useful. I'm the weakest, so I was a bit worried about events. There are no rats revealed, no strength event, so that is good. But sadly drodriguez is able to win that vast territory very cheaply, so I think that is quite helpful for him. I was not happy to see it. I was not willing to bid because I could get hit by a double aggression afterwards. I was not willing to take that risk. And yeah, so drodriguez gets this colony. Maybe that was seeded by him. I think 2 out of the 3 events were seeded by him. And as we remember, he was willing to take that navigation early on over the urban growth. But now he doesn't have the navigation and maybe was able to win the colony regardless. Ching finishes the railroad, goes up to 16 strength. Goes for the selective breeding, upgrades his food production, takes the revolutionary idea and the cannons. Overall, a very straightforward, clean turn, even though missing out on the cavalryman could potentially be bad, because I know that he doesn't have the defensive army tactic available. drodriguez offers a scientific cooperation pact to Ching, and I was happy to see that it is rejected, especially because I felt like it could be a pact that Ching could accept, because science-wise, they have a very similar amount of science saved up, a very similar amount of income, and Ching even has the revolutionary idea. drodriguez has, of course, some technologies maybe that he wants to develop soon, but Ching also has the cannons. Maybe he thought that he might like to go for an H3 government form, which is one big technology, which is not ideal for that pact, but I was still surprised to reject this pact, and I was happy that he rejected this pact, because I think that could have offered both of them quite some benefits. drodriguez uses the ocean liner service to increase his population, takes the cavalryman, increases his population once normally, develops the navigation, meaning that maybe there could even be another colony coming, or a strength event, maybe he wanted to do it in order to get stronger. H3 starts, amaj seeds. Still no rats revealed, instead the good harvest, so all of the players are gaining some food instead of losing some. He develops the cannon, takes the cannons, upgrades the farm, takes the efficient upgrade, interestingly over the wave of nationalism, and at the next turn can potentially finish the Kremlin if he would like to. I at my turn was not willing to see it, especially because the rats are a possibility, so I have to be a bit careful here. And this turn there's finally the coal available. There's also a democracy, which I could use to do a Robespierre revolution, but I don't have enough science to go for both democracy and the coal. And I do think the coal is more important here, even though I didn't like it to give this early democracy to Ching, who has the Acropolis and could profit from it very quickly. But I think I can go for 2 coal upgrades, and it's just something that I kind of need to do here. I go for the coal. Go for 1 upgrade, play the reserves for resources, go for a 2nd upgrade, increase my population to get out of corruption. And with my last 3 actions, I take the wave of nationalism and the frugality. So I think it is a somewhat clean turn, but still not a clear one, because I am taking a bit of a risk here. I still haven't found a tactic yet. There's a copy of cavalrymen and tanks on the row. If both of those are taken away or maybe discarded, even though it's impossible for those cards to be discarded, because those leaders can't be taken, and so the Suez Canal will be discarded on Ching's turn, Maria on drodriguez's turn, and Shakespeare on amaj's turn, so both of those cards, even the cavalryman, are guaranteed to not be discarded, but if they are taken away, I am starting to get limited for my tactic options if I don't have the ability to go for H3 tactics that include cavalry units. So maybe you should say that that frugality is too greedy. Maybe that is actually too greedy. Especially because the military could still one way on catching up to drodriguez if I maybe get a military theory and draw the right cards. On the other hand, I felt like, Ching might very well take either cavalryman and tanks. Amaj could certainly take the tanks or cavalryman to also be prepared for H3 tactics. Then there is of course still a copy of tanks left. But yeah, I think maybe I was played it too greedily here. Even though the frugality might of course be quite useful for me, as I don't get a lot more food out without the help of the frugality. So I think it's also a card that helps me. And if I end up getting cavalrymen or tanks, it might, in hindsight, be the correct decision, but I feel like it was a bit too risky to not just take the cavalryman here and have some options for the tactics. And yeah, so that is my turn. I keep 2 colonization cards in an event, and I draw something interesting here. I draw the mechanized army tactic, and that is a tactic that I can work with. And I draw a war, so I was very happy about the draw, but now, of course, I was even more worried about those cards being taken away, and I was really, really hoping that one of those cards will be available for me. I mean, I could even use the tactic outdated to gain a somewhat reasonable amount of strength, but of course it would be a lot better to get a full bonus here, especially with that war that I'm having. If I get Air Forces, military theory, that might be enough to maybe go for a big war against drodriguez and maybe with that potentially catch up to him. It's the beginning of H3, so we can take a look at the overview. Culture-wise, it's quite close between me, amaj and Ching, and drodriguez is starting to run away with Bach. Economy-wise, I think I still have the best position. The coal was late, which was a bit awkward for me, but I was at least able to get into those coal mines quickly. So I have now, together with Ching, the biggest resource production, I have the biggest science production, and I still have those 9 actions. All of my other opponents have only 6. So I do think that gives me an advantage for the economy. However, for the moment, I'm limited for my military with my military actions. At least I have the patriotism in hand with the Silk Road bonus. The Silk Road, of course, also adding a bit of small benefits on top of the production that you can see here. So I felt like my position is good. I thought I should be able to hopefully finish before amaj and Ching, who have a similar amount of culture as me, even though Ching is still also not a bad position. And then it's the question if I will be able to catch up to drodriguez, who is running a bit away with the culture, but also doesn't have the strongest economy. I mean, he has good population income, solid resource production, solid science production, but it's not overwhelming. And you can catch up a lot of points with impacts, wonders. I have that wonder tactic, so I do think there are options how I can catch up to him, but especially if I maybe don't get the ability to go for the tactic, and it will be decided at my next turn, because as you can see, the second copy of tanks are revealed, which could be good for me, because the chance that all of those are taken away is maybe not that high. So I was rather happy to see it, but also even more worried, because if they are now taken away, then it's completely clear that I won't be able to go for the tactic, so I was a bit nervous. Ching Seeds and the Dark Ages are revealed. Those are actually quite impactful, especially amaj loses lots of science. I sadly also lose 5, which is a bit hurtful. Ching doesn't lose as much, but it makes it more difficult for him, and this turn impossible to go for the democracy, so he also maybe gets hurt by that a bit. He increases his population, plays the revolutionary idea, takes the computers. As we saw at the beginning, all of the science leaders and lab leaders are there, so I think it makes sense to be willing to take that for expensive, even though the democracy, of course, also could have been useful for him. drodriguez Seeds. I was first of all happy that no strength event was revealed, and of course I was also happy that an event is revealed that damages one of my opponents quite heavily. Ching gets punished for having 4 unhappy workers and will have to lose 2 of them at his next turn. drodriguez uses the ocean liner service, develops the cavalryman, and Ching hasn't taken the cavalryman, and I kind of expected him to do it, as he doesn't have the defensive army, but he decides against it, and with that it should now get more and more very likely that I should get a copy of a cavalry unit, which I was very happy to see. drodriguez takes the democracy, a somewhat ambitious grab because the science is very low, but maybe the alternatives are also not that nice, so I guess he has to spend his actions here somewhat inefficiently. Reveals the classic army tactic. He's now 25 strength and is putting some pressure on his opponents. There's still that second copy of democracy, which I maybe can do a Robespierre revolution in, but there's also a copy of communism coming down the road, which I was happy to see and felt like that could be an even more interesting option for me. amaj goes for some upgrades to riflemen, can maybe copy the classic army tactic that drodriguez just revealed, takes the movies, maybe being prepared for Fleming, but apart from Fleming there isn't really a lot of synergy, and then ends his turn. And at my turn, I think I have to go for the communism revolution. Of course, the democracy is available for cheaper, the culture production could be somewhat nice, but it's just 8 science cheaper. I don't have the most science after the Dark Ages left. And I have drawn this war and a tactic, and I know now that I can either take the cavalryman or the tanks this turn. And if my plan is to go for a war, And I felt like that is a very good plan for me now. Then, of course, the additional military actions are quite nice. Also, the additional resource production could help me building some additional units. So I think communism is the clearly better choice here. And I also was extremely happy that I had this option available, especially because I can do the revolution. And immediately afterwards, I can go for a new leader with Steve Jobs. Robespierre has done his job, a very nice job. I think he was extremely strong, allowing me to go into this early republic and now also that early communism. And I could maybe wait for other leaders, but Steve Jobs helps me with the happy faces, which is useful also for the prosperity that is coming. And I have enough resources, hopefully, also with all those yellow cards that I'm having to get a bunch of culture out of him. So I think it's just good to replace Robespierre as quickly as possible. I go for Steve Jobs. I will develop the cannons because drodriguez went up to 25 strength and I don't want to be in danger of aggression. And now that patriotism comes in extremely handy because if I wouldn't have had it in hand, it would be somewhat dangerous. I could do the strong revolution, but it would come at the cost of being vulnerable to an aggression. But now I can play the patriotism, gain 2 military actions after doing the revolution. And I can also play the wave of nationalism, as I'm the weakest at the moment, and with that I can actually build both of those cannons for free, resource-wise. Of course, it means that I don't get any draws, but I got a bit lucky with my first draw, having the tactic and having the war, so it's maybe not too bad, and I was just happy that I could make sure to not be in danger of an aggression. Sadly, I'm missing 1 strength to not be the weakest, so I could get still punished by strength events. And I have 2 actions left. I could just take the tanks, but it would cause corruption. I could have not played the wave, but it just felt like a good opportunity to play it. And so I decided to go for the cavalryman. Them being cheaper, science and resource-wise could be useful for me anyway, especially if I maybe plan on going for both military theory and air forces, which could be strong if I get the opportunity to do so. And they are also available action cheap. Also, they are just in different ways cheaper, and also I can go for a nice last action then, which is to upgrade that religion to organized religion. I don't need the happy faces this turn, but soon I might need the happy faces, and I get 2 more happy faces for the prosperity, so I get 2 more food, could allow me to get an additional population out, and with getting the prosperity I can also increase my population a bunch of times soon. And then I will, as said, soon actually need the happy face, so it's an action that I then have already out of the way, and it helps me to get out of corruption. And then I take the cavalryman to be prepared for that mechanized army tactic. Jing Jing Seeds. The historic territory is revealed. I just passed. I didn't want to be in danger of an aggression here. drodriguez is able to win it, but he has to pay something for it. 2 swordsmen, 2 colonization cards. That is certainly not cheap. And I was actually happy to see it, because I have the war, I have the tactic, and I also feel like this bit or this colony win could be a bit too greedy from his side, because he doesn't have a lot of resource yellows in hand, he doesn't have a lot of resources saved up in order to be competitive in strength. He probably has to build 2 classic army tactics and 2 air forces, and with having sent 2 swordsmen away, that gets maybe a bit harder for him to achieve. So of course he gets even more culture, his lead is even bigger now, but I was happy to see him pay the price for that colony. Jing Jing goes for the professional sports, fixes his happy faces, that I think is extremely important for him. He then takes the tanks, it's the last cavalry tech, so he kinda has to go for it maybe, and then also upgrades a warrior to rifleman. drodriguez increases his population, takes the computers, builds the swordsman, takes the professional sports, which is an interesting grab, maybe a denial, but there's no Pierre in the game. He has for the moment more than enough happy faces, of course. He has the ocean liner service, he will get a lot more population out, and at some point those happy faces that he has at the moment are not enough, but it feels like not the most important card to take here. He then takes another copy efficient upgrade and gets out of corruption by increasing his population. And again, I think he plays it a bit greedily here. Maybe his plan is to get into computers. Those efficient upgrades are, of course, quite useful for him. But not taking the patriotism for 1 civil action in a position where he's running away with the culture and maybe has to be the most afraid of potentially getting hit by something military heavy. Yeah, I do think he has to take the patriotism here. And maybe also the modern infantry, just having more options, maybe to increase his strength. Modern infantry, maybe not really, because he is low in science, but I think the patriotism he has to take, and then he could take patriotism, efficient upgrade, computers. I guess he has also some hand space issues, but I do think he needs to take that patriotism here. Amai seats. There is the prosperity revealed. I was happy to not get really punished for being the lowest in strength for a while. Apart from that border conflict that I got hit by some turns ago. I get 7 additional food, so that is quite nice for me. Amai finishes the gremlin this turn. It is now quite late. Also, as you can see, it immediately gives him an unhappy burger, so I'm not sure how nice that gremlin is for him, but gets a bit of culture and some additional actions. He takes the air forces and the patriotism, so he is making sure to get the right cards, even at the cost of the cards that maybe make him more safe, or maybe even threatening himself. He can copy the classic army and can now go for an air force. So he might be a bit threatening himself soon, and is willing to even have corruption, but one of the corruption will be food corruption. Of course, I'm also in a position where I'm really hoping to get air forces, because I think as soon as I have the air forces, I hopefully will be able to go for a big enough war that will make me able to catch up to drodriguez. If I don't get the air forces and maybe drodriguez gets them instead, then of course things could be a bit more tricky. So I was really hoping that maybe the air forces could be revealed. Amai already this turn copies the classic army tactic so that he isn't the weakest after his turn. And no air forces are revealed as so far, but the good news for me is maybe that Amai was the first player to get the air forces, meaning that I should now have the best chances out of me, Ching and drodriguez to get the second or third copy. I used the frugality with the Silk Road bonus. I increased my population again. I used the 2 free military actions that I'm having to build 2 cannons, as I will need them soon anyway. And then I also, to get out of corruption, have to increase my population again. I have 6 actions left, and I just decided to grab patriotism, military theory, and a military build-up. With having the war and the tactic, I decided to go to maybe just go all in on the military thing. I don't know if I get air forces yet, but I have decent chances to get them. And even without air forces, with having that military theory and maybe being able to go for at least 3 tactics, I felt like I also have a decent amount of strength and could still go for wars even if I don't get the air forces. So I just took all the resource yellows away, but with me not revealing the tactic yet, because I wanted to get 3 draws, there is a chance that I might be able to use that military build-up for some resources, maybe even the full resources potentially. And I deny that all of those resources from my opponents, and I take the military theory, which also of course could make my strength potential even more higher. And I again do get a bit lucky here. I draw a second war, so if I am able to pull off wars, then I have the wars now. So yeah, that's certainly some lucky draws for me. Ching seeds. I could have revealed the tactic, which would have made me the strongest, but as said, I wanted to get more draws, and staying weaker could also be beneficial for using the military build-up. Luckily, again, there's no strength event, instead the civil unrest, which costs Amai for culture. Ching this turn goes for the computer upgrades, goes for 2 of them, goes for Marie Curie, replacing Napoleon, and then takes the civil service. He isn't taking any of those reserves, so he also is playing it a bit greedily, I think. drodriguez seats, opens the economic progress. I think it's a fine card for me because, of course, Amai and Ching are getting maybe a little bit more stuff out of this, but I still get 7 additional resources, and a player that I ideally want to go for war against, drodriguez, only gets 0 food and 2 resources, so doesn't really get a lot out of that. drodriguez goes for 1 computer upgrade, takes a copy of reserves, increases his population a bunch of times, builds a cavalryman, a swordsman, so building up some units, remaining the strongest, and then takes the rockets. Interestingly, maybe he has still something like Napoleonic army, where he wants to use the rockets. Could have taken urban growth, which he maybe could have used at some point, or the engineering genius, so interesting that he's willing to take the rockets. It's not really a denial, I think. Maybe he just has some more options with having that. It's now already at over 100 culture. Amaj, interestingly, offers the peace treaty to me, which I maybe could have accepted, but I rejected here because I think I very, very likely will declare my wars against drodriguez, at least one war, but I mean, I have a second war, I could have aggressions, and it just gives me a little bit of culture, and at the end I felt I rather want to keep my options open. But on the other hand, Amaj has the air forces, is in a position where he maybe can go for the most strength at the moment, and I maybe, if I don't get the air forces, my wars might potentially not end up being too big against drodriguez, and then maybe the little bit of additional culture from the peace treaty could still matter, so maybe I could have also accepted it, but it could also just limit my options, so at the end I decided against it, but I think maybe I could have actually accepted it. Amaj takes the military theory, the reserves, so it again looks like he is planning to build a lot of units. He builds an air force, increases his population 2 times, which gets him out of corruption. And again, the question is, will one of the 2 copies of air forces be revealed? It would make my turn a lot more lot more straightforward, because if no air forces are revealed, I have to find a turn that prepares me for both scenarios, having no air forces available at the next turn and having air forces on the row at the next turn, which could be tricky. So ideally, of course, I was hoping to get a copy of air force here. And again, I do get lucky here, the air forces are revealed, and with that I was quite confident that I will be able to go for quite a big war here. I maybe could do it in different ways, how I set it up exactly, but I decided to, with having already 2 wars in hand, I could have gone instead of the cavalryman for the military theory. Maybe I should have also thought about this option more. I just went for the cavalryman relatively straightforward, but I do think this turn also just works out very well, so I think it's at the end fine to do it like that, but I could have maybe had some options with going for military theory instead of the cavalryman, and then if I take a copy of revolutionary idea, I still have enough science to go for both cavalryman and air forces at the next turn, but then I also still need to upgrade all of those, so I think it's better to do it like this. I take the air forces. I can play the military build-up actually for 10 resources, because all of my opponents got stronger, and then I can use those resources to build 2 cannons. I upgrade all of my knights to cavalryman, and I could have not gone for the last upgrade and reviewed the tactic already. It would make me the strongest, and there are some strength events coming, so maybe because of that it could be worthwhile. But then again, I also thought that maybe it is also not bad to hide the tactic for now. Of course, it's just looking very suspicious. But I mean, maybe the opponents are playing it. Maybe one of the opponents isn't playing carefully. Maybe just looking at my current strength, not looking at the situation exactly. If I just have a strength number of over 50 here or something, it's basically impossible to overlook that I'm a big threat. With only being at 31, if one of the players is not careful, maybe they could play it slightly more greedily, I felt. And I'm not the weakest, so I was hoping that not revealing the tactic here is fine. And then I have 4 actions left, and I certainly wanted to take the revolutionary idea, because that gives me just the amount of science that I need to go for both the military theory and the air forces at the next turn. And I now could have, for example, also played the patriotism, which, for example, could allowed me to reveal the tactic and go for all of those upgrades, but I can, of course, also use the patriotism again at the next turn with the Silk Road bonus, or I mean, I could have just used it this turn with the Silk Road bonus, and I would have actually gotten 2 draws, so that was something that I certainly considered. Or I could reveal the tactic and get 1 draw. I considered those things. But at the end, I decided to also go for the reserves here, not because I necessarily need the resources, but rather because if I played it with the Silk Road bonus, I gain 5 food out of it, which allows me to gain 1 more population out. My plan is to at the next turn declare war and go for 3 air forces, And at the moment I don't have any free population, so being able to go for one less disband could just be quite nice. And so at the end I took the reserves, and again it is also a bit of a denial and removes resources from my opponents that they could use for the military. So with having the air forces, I felt now very comfortable about my position, and at the next turn I will for certain be able to go for a big war. There's no Gandhi that could pop off, also no Churchill, no Manhattan Project, so all of the military related things that maybe could help my opponents are not in there, and with that also no Marlene, and with that I can at the next turn go for quite a big war. I mean, only Gandhi would be the one that really stopped me from warring. The others just could have maybe given my opponents a bit more strength. Jing wins the inhabited territory. I just passed. I need all of my units. At least he has to send a rifleman, so it's still somewhat expensive for him. And he then goes for tanks, builds one tank, builds another tank, takes the oil, interestingly, in the revolutionary year, doesn't take the reserves. A bit greedy again, I think. But he rather just takes those cards. Maybe he is hoping that if I go for war, drodriguez will be the target, which I guess is a reasonable thing to assume. Drodriguez offers an international tourism to Qingqing. Qingqing has 3 wonders, so drodriguez would gain 3, Qingqing only 2 production, and drodriguez would get an additional production. So I think it's fair that Qingqing rejects it. Of course, drodriguez, maybe he was hoping that Qingqing still wants to have that just to gain some points against me and Amaj, because at the moment he has that big lead. But the thing is, of course, with how I played my turn, he should be expecting to get hit by a big war, and then out of the sudden it's already close again, and Qingqing might be in a position where he isn't really wanting to give drodriguez that many additional points. So maybe drodriguez could have also just offered it to me. We would just gain fair and square the same amount of points, or even to Amaj, who is a bit behind. But but maybe drodriguez just wanted to try it and gain even more culture out of it. He plays the reserves for resources, builds a cavalryman, takes the reserves. He gets that copy of Air Force, which Qingqing also didn't take. So Qingqing also playing it a bit greedily. And I'm not the only player who could go towards war, as we will see at Amaj's turn. So Qingqing also maybe could have played it a bit more carefully. And also drodriguez again, I think, could have played it more carefully, because we see, and maybe, I guess he had some hand space issues probably. That's a bit of an issue for him, because he played that second efficient upgrade and went for a lab upgrade, but that one resource is now missing for him in order to go for 2 air forces instead of only 1. He is now with the reserves at 13 instead of the 14 that he would need, but he also has a full hand. Maybe just in order to be able to go for 2 air forces. No, it's not a possibility. I thought for a moment he could maybe develop the selective breeding instead of using the efficient upgrade, but then he doesn't have the additional science production and could not go for air forces. So because of hand space issues, he is not able to threaten 2 air forces here. But I think he could have done if he maybe at the turns before just played it a bit more carefully. He loses 4 culture to famine. Amaj goes for a war against Qingqing, so Qingqing getting punished here for playing it maybe not as carefully as he could have. Amaj goes for the military theory and has now also, with the patriotism, lots of military actions, actually enough, and also enough resources too, when he goes for all of this destruction, to build an air force and a whole new army. So that's certainly not bad, and puts him at 69 strength, and he will now be able to go for that war against Qingqing. Now it's my turn. I can go for war, and I think it's also no question which player I'm targeting here. drodriguez is the one that I have to catch up to. And it will be quite a big strength increase, I think. Maybe, I'm not sure if it's my biggest strength increase ever that I had during one turn, but certainly one of the highest. I start my turn by 31 strength, actually being the weakest. And after declaring the war, I will actually play the reserves for food, so that I have to destroy less. I can increase my population, I can play the revolutionary idea, I have enough science to develop both military theory and air forces, I can do it with scoring culture for Steve Jobs. I have to destroy 2 things, I destroyed a bronze mine and actually the lab. I figured that the additional science likely doesn't do anything for me, because even with being at +4, at the end of my turn I will take the rockets, so in 2 turns I will be able to go for the rockets with +3 and again +3 science production. I only have 6 more in 2 turns, which very likely wouldn't have allowed me to go for more, an additional technology, while keeping both of those mines could allow me to potentially still go for the space flight in case that isn't taken away. So I rather destroyed one of my labs. And then I can play the patriotism. I can go for all of those air forces, and now I can reveal my tactic. I started my turn at 31, but now I will actually be at 107, so I increased my strength by 66 during this turn, which I think is quite a big strength jump, and will hopefully be enough to steal a very big amount of culture from drodriguez, and I even have that second war that I can deploy at the next turn. And then I said I will take the rockets so that I have one more technology that I can develop with Steve Jobs. I draw 2 cards. One of them, the impact of progress, is even quite a good impact for me to seed. Ching Ching builds a tank. He is hit by that war. With that, fulfills the Conquistador's tactic. Goes for the modern infantry. Those upgrades are relatively efficient. He can spend 6 resources for 6 strength. And then he also can go for the fundamentalism, so he has a somewhat decent defense set up here, takes the urban growth, allowing him to maybe build a professional sports plus a unit, so also threatening a somewhat decent amount of strength for the next turn. And is now even at 60 strength. Nobel will also likely be lost before the war will be resolved, so or certainly Ching Ching made sure of that, so Amai will also lose 2 strength. drodriguez seeds, the politics of strength is revealed. I gain now even 5 additional draws. Certainly a threatening thing to see for my opponents, because they of course don't know if I have a second war, and of course are hoping that I don't have one. At least the ones that are the most vulnerable. But now, I had the war beforehand, but I have some additional draws now, some impacts, some wars. I would have even preferred it if it would have been revealed in H4, because I had, because of my lucky draws, already an aggression and a good impact before, so I actually won't end up using those draws, but of course still a good event, and drodriguez will now miss out on draws. drodriguez builds an air force and fixes his famine, also goes for Bill Gates for some additional resources. At the next turn has now enough resources to go for 2 air forces, but can only go up to 54 strength. Him playing it a bit greedily with the colony bit, not taking the patriotism, I think, has resulted now in not being able to go for the second air force, which would be quite strong. H4 starts. Amai, sadly for him, just loses Nobel before the war evaluation, is still stealing 12 culture from Ching Ching, is now 1 culture ahead of him. And he is actually getting a raid off, destroying a computer and an opera from drodriguez, which is quite a big hit for him. So drodriguez, I guess no, the H2 cards would have been gone now anyway, but yeah, not being able to go for the second air force has even more consequences now for drodriguez. Amai gets 10 additional resources. He will use those 2 after going for Mandela, actually building 2 organized religions, which is also somewhat greedy, because I am still going for a war, and maybe it could be wise to make sure that he has a bigger military threat, but maybe he is at the moment the strongest, maybe he also feels somewhat safe and just wants to get as much culture out of it, and if he at the end is the player who doesn't get hit by the war, of course he might have been in the right at the end. Now it's my turn, and first of all I will steal, of course, a lot of culture from drodriguez. And then it will be in a bit of an awkward question on which will be the player that I declare the second war of, and maybe we can see the war evaluation first, even though it will already spoil then afterwards what will be the player, but I think it's important to see how the culture score is. And I will steal 58 culture from drodriguez, so an extremely big swing. And then, as you can see, I will actually go for a second war against drodriguez. When we take a look at the overview here, it's a very annoying decision for me to make, because at this point I have won anyway. I wouldn't even need a war, but I of course still need to play my best and score the most points. It could potentially even impact the tiebreaker if I have a bigger culture lead. So I certainly want or have to go for the war. But it's an annoying decision which player I target, because that decision will just influence which player loses the game. And annoyingly so, the strength potentials and the culture score are all extremely close for my opponents. Amaj could build an air force and a warrior, which is the most that he can do, and with that he would be at 73. Drodriguez can build 2 air forces, that would put him at +18 at 72, so 1 strength less. And Ching could build a professional sports and 1 unit, putting him at 69. So he has a slightly big strength potential. Culture-wise, Drodriguez is actually still in the lead. He also gets the Bill Gates bonus, but I think culture-wise, I mean, it's also very close. The thing is, I won't take the red cross, so Ching has the ability to go for that red cross here. Maybe leaving him with the best position culture-wise, but it's again quite close. But he is also relatively nicely prepared for impacts. There is still an H2 event. If it is arms industry, Ching's strength potential goes up, while for Drodriguez, the arms industry isn't giving him any resources. But all of that, for me, doesn't really matter, because I win the game anyway. So it's just an annoying decision to make, because my decision will just influence on which player will lose the game. And it's the strength potential as well as the culture score is quite similar for all of the opponents. And yeah, it's an annoying decision to make. But with all of that being that close, I at the end decided on what is best for me for the standings. I at this point already knew the outcome of the first game, and Drodriguez in this game was in the second position. So for me, it is best if he loses the game from that perspective. But yeah, ideally I would have liked it if just one player would be clearly weakest or clearly behind, and then I could just target that player. Now it felt a bit annoying, and at the end, that was the deciding factor. And Drodriguez can build 2 air forces depending on depending on the impacts. He might do something different, which would result in less strength. While for Ching, I think if he gets hit by the wall, his defense is he doesn't have to destroy anything, so he for certain goes for the amount of strength, while Drodriguez could maybe play around impacts and then go for less strength. For Amaj it's the same, maybe he goes only for an air force, but I guess he still has then with 72 the highest strength potential. But no, I didn't really enjoy it being in such a position where I just decide who loses the game. At the end I went against Drodriguez, which is of course a bit unfair. He got hit by 2 wars now, and that of course feels a bit unfair. I think so that unfairness should not be a factor that you should factor in. You should just look in the situation at the position and figure out what makes the most sense. And sometimes the game will end up being unfair, but I don't think it would be the right choice to just go for one of the other players just to make it more fair in any way. So at the end, Drodriguez is my target here, but no, I don't like being in such a position. I go for the space flight. It wasn't taken away. I had the next gen have just enough resource to develop one more technology with the Steve Jobs culture and finish the space flight, so that's quite nice, and the satellites will be quite nice for me for the impact of progress. I didn't bother increasing my strength, as then I couldn't finish the space flight. Ching goes for the red cross, builds 3 steps of it, builds a professional sports, and ends his turn. Drodriguez builds an air force, and he indeed doesn't build a second air force, stays at 67 strength, and builds 2 religions, develops the rockets, takes the mechanized agriculture. Amaj seeds and opens the developed territory, so no arms industry in top. And I pass, of course, because I would lose a lot of strength. So Amaj is the only one willing to bid for it, wins it for a knight. He plays the revolutionary idea. Goes for the mechanized agriculture, goes for an upgrade, maybe helping him for some impacts, and then he is actually willing to destroy 2 mines. That costs him some points for some impacts, especially Harmony. And when we take a look again at drodriguez, he built those 2 religions, maybe because of an impact of happiness, but his happiness is quite not that great. I mean, maybe happiness could have been the reason why he took the professional sports earlier on, but one impact that might be the reason why he built those religions is the impact of harmony. So am I destroying those 2 mines? It could potentially cost him a lot of points for the harmony, but maybe he had the impact of strength in hand, and that he just seeded and needs to destroy those things in order to make sure to be the 2nd strongest. At my turn, I steal 45 culture from drodriguez. I see the impact of progress. The impact on top is actually the impact of strength, so am I immediately being prepared for that, scoring the 2nd most culture. I mean, he went also for a bit of a military push, so maybe with that it may make sense that he was already quite early willing to commit to that impact. And then I, of course, gained the most out of it. I, at my turn, developed the satellites, finished the space flight for 27 points, and then at the end of my turn, I have quite a big lead. I actually have more culture at the moment combined than all of my opponents combined. The only thing that still needs to be decided is whether Ching or Amai finishes at the 2nd position. The first impact is the impact of architecture, a good one for Ching. The impact of happiness is revealed, so drodriguez was able to fix that impact, but it's still not a good one for him. It doesn't change anything between Amai and Ching. What does change something is the impact of science. That's quite a strong one for Ching. Then there's the impact of harmony, so Amai now does get punished for disbanding those 2 mines, only has +4 in that impact. drodriguez catches even up now to Amai, but the gap is still too big. Then there's the impact of progress that I've seeded, giving me +24, +14 to Ching, +10 to Amai, +12 for drodriguez. And there's the impact of agriculture, which is the same for Ching for Amai, meaning at the end I'm able to win. Ching is in the 2nd position, Amai in the 3rd, and drodriguez at the end in the last position. So I was able to win this game. I think in the first 2 games of this World Championship, I have gotten quite lucky, especially with the H3 draws. In both of those games, I drew wars very early. In this game, I even drew the tactic that I needed early, so I just got extremely lucky with my H3 draws. I still think I also played quite well, and maybe I could have found other ways to win, but with those draws, both of those games at the end were relatively decisive, especially this one, with me going over 100 strength and being able to pull off 2 wars, even though I didn't even have the most draws available. So I do think I got a bit lucky there. Nonetheless, I think it was an interesting game from how my setup was with the Pyramids and Silk Road, the Ashoka early game, and then the early Robespierre Revolution, the exciting moments where I thought maybe I could get a colony with Columbus, then the coal being laid, which maybe caused some challenges for me. And then in H3 I went for those wars to catch up to drodriguez. drodriguez at the end losing, of course, just because I choose him again as the target in the 2nd war, so it's unfortunate for him. Of course, very frustrating for him. But on the other hand, I think he could have played it a bit more carefully, a little bit less greedily. Maybe that could have resulted in him being a bit better prepared, and maybe not getting hit by the 2nd war. Maybe he would still get hit, because maybe he would lose less culture in this 1st war, and then he would maybe still be my biggest threat. But I do think he also going for Bach is maybe fine, but he at some points maybe should have played it a little bit less greedily. And then Ching and Amai, for them it was somewhat close at the end. Ching had a relatively strong setup in regards of how well he was prepared for the impacts, and with that was able to overtake Amai in the final standings, despite losing actually some points to him in a war. Alright, with that we are at the end of the game, and now that the first 2 games have finished, we can also take a quick look at the current standings. And my start in the group is basically as strong as a start can be. I won my first two four-player games, but not only that, my opponents divided their points as equally as possible, meaning I have already after two games a 9 points lead towards the second place. So yeah, basically a start it basically can't be any better for me, meaning I already will go with quite a lead into the three-player games. Of course, I'm very happy about that start. Still, though, of course, I have to be careful. I shouldn't play those three-player games lightly with having that lead. Now I still have to focus and ideally score as many points as possible to maybe also be in a better seeding basket for the next stage in the upper bracket, and to also, of course, score points for the clicker rating and so on. And of course, no, at this point it's definitely not over, even though my start is quite good, and I hopefully will gather enough points in the 3 and 2 player games to remain at the first position, but that's not clear yet, and I have to stay focused in order to achieve that. Alright, with that we are at the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.